Socialism, Utopian and Scientific by Friedrich Engels. While the revolution ensured the political triumph of the bourgeoisie in France, in England, Watt, Arkwright, Cartwright, and others initiated an industrial revolution, which completely shifted the center of gravity of economic power. The wealth of the bourgeoisie increased considerably faster than that of the landed aristocracy. Within the bourgeoisie itself, the financial aristocracy, the bankers, etc., were more and more pushed into the background by the manufacturers. The compromise of 1689, even after the gradual changes it had undergone in favor of the bourgeoisie, no longer corresponded to the relative position of the parties to it. The character of these parties too had changed. The bourgeoisie of 1830 was very different from that of the preceding century. The political powers still left to the aristocracy and used by them to resist the pretensions of the new industrial bourgeoisie, became incompatible with the new economic interests. A fresh struggle with the aristocracy was needed. It could only end in a victory of the new economic power. First, the Reform Act was pushed through in spite of all resistance, under the impulse of the French Revolution of 1830. It gave to the bourgeoisie a recognized and powerful place in Parliament. Then the repeal of the Corn Laws, a move toward free trade, which settled once and for all the supremacy of the bourgeoisie, and especially of its most active portion, the manufacturers, over the landed aristocracy. This was the greatest victory of the bourgeoisie. 'Twas, however, also the last it gained in its own exclusive interests. Whatever triumphed it attained later on, it had the share of a new social power. First its ally, but soon its rival. The Industrial Revolution had created a class of large manufacturing capitalists, but also a class, and a far more numerous one, of manufacturing workpeople. This class gradually increased in numbers, in proportion as the Industrial Revolution seized upon one branch of manufacture after another, and in the same proportion it increased its power. This power improved as early as 1824 by forcing a reluctant parliament to repeal the acts forbidding combinations of workmen. During the Reform agitation, the working men constituted the radical wing of the Reform Party. The Act of 1832, having excluded them from suffrage, they formulated their demands in the People's Charter, and constituted themselves in opposition to the great bourgeois anti-Corn Law party into an independent party, the Chartists, the first working men's party of modern times. Then came the Continental Revolutions of February and March 1848, in which the working people played such a prominent part, and, at least in Paris, put forward demands which were certainly inadmissible from the point of view of capitalist society. And then came the general reaction. First the defeat of the Chartists on April 10th, 1848, then the crushing of Paris working men's insurrection in June of the same year, then the disasters of 1849 in Italy, Hungary, and South Germany, and, at last, the victory of Louis Bonaparte over Paris, December 2nd, 1851. For a time, at least, the bugbear of working-class pretensions was put down, but at what cost? If the British bourgeois had been convinced before of the necessity of maintaining the common people in a religious mood, how much more must he feel that he feel necessity after all these experiences? Regardless of the sneers of his continental compeers, he continued to spend thousands and tens of thousands year after year upon the evangelization of the lower orders. Not content with his own native religious machinery, he appealed to Brother Jonathan, the greatest organizer in existence of religion as a trade, and imported from American revivalism, Moody and Sankey, and the like. He accepted the dangerous aid of the Salvation Army, which revives the propaganda of the early Christianity, appeals to the poor as the elect, fights capitalism in a religious way, and thus fosters an element of early Christian class antagonism, which one day may become troublesome to well-to-do people who now find the ready money for it. It seems a law of historical development that the bourgeoisie can in no European country get hold of political power, at least for any length of time, in the same exclusive way in which the feudal aristocracy kept hold of it during the Middle Ages. Even in France, where feudalism was completely extinguished, the bourgeoisie as a whole has held full possession of the government for very short periods only. During Louis Philippe's reign, 1830 to 48, a very small portion of the bourgeoisie ruled the kingdom. By far the larger part were excluded from the suffrage by the high qualification. Under the Second Republic, from 1848 to 51, the whole bourgeoisie ruled but for 3 years only. Their incapacity brought on the Second Empire. It is only now, in the Third Republic, that the bourgeoisie as a whole have kept possession of the helm for more than 20 years, and they are already showing lively signs of decadence. A durable reign of the bourgeoisie has been possible only in countries like America, where feudalism was unknown, and society at the very beginning started from a bourgeois basis. And even in France and America, the successors of the bourgeoisie, the working people, are already knocking at the door. In England, the bourgeoisie never held undivided sway. Even the victory of 1832 left the landed aristocracy in almost exclusive possession of all the leading government offices. The meekness with which the middle class submitted to this remained inconceivable to me until the great liberal manufacturer, Mr. W.A. Forster, in a public speech, implored the young men of Bradford to learn French as a means to get on in the world, and quoted from his own experience how sheepish he looked when, as a cabinet minister, he had to move in a society where French was, at least, as necessary as English. The fact was, the English middle class of that time were, as a rule, quite uneducated upstarts, and could not help leaving to the aristocracy those superior government places where other qualifications were required than mere insular narrowness and insular conceit seasoned by business sharpness. Even now the endless newspaper debates about middle-class education show that the English middle class does not yet consider itself good enough for the best education, and looks to something more modest. Thus, even after the repeal of the Corn Laws, it appeared a matter of course that the men who had carried the day, the Camdens, Brights, Forsters, etc., should remain excluded from a share in the official government of the country, until 2 decades afterwards a new Reform Act opened to them the door of the cabinet. The English bourgeoisie are, up to the present day, so deeply penetrated by a sense of their social inferiority that they keep up, at their own expense, and that of the nation, an ornamental cast of drones to represent the nation worthily at all state functions, and they consider themselves highly honored whenever one of themselves is worthy of admission into the select and privileged body manufactured, after all, by themselves. The industrial and commercial middle class had, therefore, not yet succeeded in driving the landed aristocracy completely from political power when another competitor, the working class, appeared on the stage. The reaction after the Chartist movement and the Continental Revolutions, as well as the unparalleled extension of English trade from 1848 to 66, ascribed vulgarly to free trade alone, but due far more to colossal development of railways, ocean steamers, and means of intercourse generally, had again driven the working class into the dependency of the Liberal Party, of which they formed, as in pre-Chartist times, the radical wing. Their claims to the franchise, however, gradually became irresistible, while the Whig leaders of the Liberals funked. Disraeli showed his superiority by making the Tories seize the favourable moment and introduce household suffrage into the boroughs, along with the redistribution of seats. Then followed the ballot. Then, in 1884, the extension of household suffrages to the counties and a fresh redistribution of seats by which electoral districts were to some extent equalized. All these measures considerably increased the electoral power of the working class, so much so that in at least 150 to 200 constituencies, that class now furnished the majority of the voters. But parliamentary government is a capital school for teaching respect for tradition. If the middle class looked with awe and veneration upon what Lord John Manners playfully called our own nobility, the mass of the working people then looked up with respect and deference to what used to be designated as their betters, the middle class. Indeed, the British working men some 50 years ago was the model workman, whose respectful regard for the position of his master and whose self-restraining modesty in claiming rights for himself counseled our German economists of the Cafe Socialist School for the incurable communistic and revolutionary tendencies of their own working men at home. But English middle class, good men of business as they are, saw farther than the German professors. They had shared their powers, but reluctantly, with the working class. They had learnt during the Chartist years what the robustus and malatusus the people is capable of, and since that time they had been compelled to incorporate the better part of the People's Charter in the statutes of the United Kingdom. Now, if ever the people must be kept in order by moral means, and the first and foremost of all moral means of action upon the masses is and remains religion. Hence the parsons' majorities on the school boards. Hence the increasing self-taxation of the bourgeoisie for the support of all sorts of revivalism, from ritualism to the Salvation Army. And now came the triumph of the British respectability over the free thought and religious relaxity of the continental bourgeoisie. The workmen of France and Germany had become rebellious. They were thoroughly infected with socialism, and for very good reasons, were not at all particular as to the legality of the means by which they secure their own ascendancy. The per robustus here turned from day to day more malatosus, or malatusios. Nothing remained to the French and German bourgeoisie as a last resource but to silently drop their free thought as a youngster, when sea-sickness creeps upon him, quietly drops the burning cigar he brought swaggerly on board. One by one the scoffers turned pious in outward behavior, spoke with respect of the Church, its dogmas and rites, and even conformed with the latter as far as could not be helped. French bourgeois dine magri on Fridays, and German ones say outlawed Protestant sermons in their pews on Sundays. They come to the grief with materialism. Thy religion must invoke unharmed or done. Religion must be kept alive for the people. That was the only and the last means to save society from utter ruin. Unfortunately for themselves, they did not find this out until they had done their level best to break up religion forever. And now it was the turn of the British bourgeoisie to sneer and to say, "Why, you fools, I could have told you that 2 centuries ago." However, I am afraid neither the religious stolidity of the British nor the post-festum conversion of the continental bourgeois will stem the rising proletarian tide. Tradition is a great breaking force, is the vis and acte of history, but being merely passive is sure to be broken down, and thus religion will be no lasting safeguard to capitalist society. If our juridical, philosophical, or religious ideas are either more or less remote offshoots of the economical relations prevailing in a given society, such ideas cannot, in the long run, withstand the effects of a complete change in these relations. And unless we believe in supernatural revelation, we must admit that no religious tenets will ever suffice to prop up a tottering society. In fact, in England too, the working people have begun to move again. They are no doubt shackled by traditions of various kinds. Bourgeois traditions such as widespread belief that there can be but 2 parties, conservatives and liberals, and that the working class must work out its salvation by and through the great Liberal Party. Working men's traditions inherited from the first tentative efforts at independent action, such as the exclusion from ever so many old trade unions of all applicants who have not gone through a regular apprenticeship, which means the breeding by every such union of its own black legs. But for all that, the English working class is moving, as even Professor Brentano has sorrowfully had to report to his brother Catholic socialists. It moves, like all things in England, with a slow and measured step, with hesitation here, with more or less unfruitful tentative attempts there. It moves now and then with an over-cautious mistrust of the name of socialism, while it gradually absorbs the substance, and the movement spreads and seizes one layer of the workers after another. It has now shaken off vertapeur, the unskilled labourers of the East End of London, and we all know what a splendid impulse these fresh forces have given it in return. And if the pace of the movement is not up to the impatience of some people, let them not forget that it is the working class which keeps alive the finest qualities of the English character, and that, if a step in advance is once gained in England, it is, as a rule, never lost afterwards. If the sons of the old Chartists, for reasons unexplained above, were not quite up to the mark, the grandsons bid fair to be worthy of their forefathers. But the triumph of the working class European does not depend upon England alone. It can only be secured by the cooperation of at least England, France, and Germany. In both the latter countries, the working class movement is well ahead of England, and Germany it is even within measurable distance of success. The progress it has there made during the last 25 years is unparalleled. It advances with ever-increasing velocity. If the German middle class have shown themselves limitedly deficient in political capacity, discipline, courage, energy, and perseverance, the German working class have given ample proof of all these qualities 4 centuries ago. Germany was the starting point of the first upheaval of the European middle class. As things are now, it is outside the limits of possibility that Germany will be the scene too of the first great victory of the European proletariat. A letter from Friedrich Engels, London, April 20th, 1892, Auto Domini.